March of 2022, the most famous superyacht on Earth went on the run. 533 feet of steel, 9 decks, racing east across the Atlantic while half the internet watched its little orange dot crawl across a ship-tracking website like it was a Netflix thriller. Now, this is a ship that can detect an incoming missile. It can blind a camera with a laser. It carries its own submarine. And none of it, not one system on board, could protect it from a single signature on a piece of paper in London. I'm talking about Eclipse, Roman Abramovich's legendary flagship. The internet loves to tell you this yacht cost $1.5 billion. Today, I'm going to show you what it actually cost, what's really hidden inside those 9 decks, and why the most secure private vessel ever built has spent the last 4 years essentially hiding. And trust me, the real story is far stranger than the rumor. To understand this ship, we have to go back to February 25, 2005. That day, a very quiet order landed at Blohm+Voss in Hamburg, the legendary German shipyard that once built the battleship Bismarck. There was no press release, no owner's name. Inside the yard, the project was known only by a code, M147. It took more than 5 years and thousands of workers to bring her to life. And when Eclipse finally left Hamburg on December 9, 2010, about 2 weeks before Christmas, she instantly became the largest private yacht on the planet. Quite the Christmas present. Let me put that scale into perspective. 533 feet is longer than 3 Olympic swimming pools laid end to end, or about 1.5 American football fields. 9 decks rise from the waterline, 13,564 gross tons of interior volume, more than some cruise ships. All of it wrapped in a famously calm, understated shell by British designer Terence Disdale, who gave the world's biggest yacht the sandy, relaxed palette of a beach house. She held the world's largest crown for 2.5 years, until a 590-foot giant called Azam finally took it in 2013. But size was never really the point of Eclipse. The point was, what's inside? So what does a ship like this cost? Here's where it gets interesting. The build contract was reported at around 550 million euros, roughly $700 million. That's nearly the price of 3 Boeing 787 Dreamliners for one man's boat. But over the years, headline writers kept inflating the number. First $1 billion, then 1.2, then the $1.5 billion figure you see everywhere today. Here's the honest truth. No invoice has ever been published, and Abramovich has never confirmed a single number in his life. Most serious estimates put the build at around 700 million, with later valuations climbing past $1 billion once you count years of upgrades. And remember, buying the ship is only the entry fee. The rule of thumb in yachting says upkeep runs about 10% of the price every single year. On a $700 million boat, that's $70 million a year before fuel, before crew salaries for 70 people, before a single glass of champagne is poured. Keep that gap in mind, because by the end of this video, you'll see that the real price of Eclipse has nothing to do with either number. Step aboard and the scale gets absurd fast. 24 guest cabins, a crew of around 70, meaning the staff outnumber the guests roughly 2 to 1. There are 2 swimming pools, and the larger one, about 16 meters long, reportedly has a rising floor that turns it into a dance floor at the push of a button. There's a cinema, a disco hall, multiple hot tubs, even a hair salon, with elevators reportedly threading the decks so nobody important ever has to climb a staircase. Below the waterline, her engines push all 13,000 tons to a reported top speed north of 20 knots, with the range to cross an ocean without stopping. And up on deck 5 sits a master suite reported at 5,000 square feet, more than double the size of the average American home, floating 6 stories above the sea. Eclipse carries not 1, but 2 helipads, 3 launch boats, and, my personal favorite, a mini-submarine, capable of diving to about 160 feet, in case the owner ever needs to simply disappear beneath the waves. And that word, disappear, is really the design brief of this entire ship, because Eclipse isn't just a palace, it's a fortress. The master suite and the bridge are wrapped in armor plating. The windows are bulletproof glass. Motion sensors reportedly watch every approach to the owner's quarters. She carries a military-grade missile detection system, quietly sweeping the horizon. And when British journalists first reported on her in 2009, they revealed the most famous gadget of all, an anti-paparazzi laser shield, a system that reportedly scans the shoreline for camera sensors and fires a burst of light at the lens, ruining the photo before it's ever taken. There is even, reportedly, an escape pod hidden in the hull. Every threat money could imagine, engineered against. Except one, because the thing that finally came for Eclipse wasn't a missile, a pirate, or a photographer. Hold that thought. First, the man on the top deck. Roman Abramovich's story is one of the most extreme in modern wealth. Orphaned before his 4th birthday and raised by relatives in northern Russia, he started out selling plastic toys, then clawed his way into the oil business during the chaotic privatizations of the 1990s. In 2005, the very year he ordered Eclipse, he sold his stake in the oil giant Sibneft to Gazprom for around $13 billion. And in one of the strangest detours in any billionaire's story, he spent 8 years as the elected governor of Chukotka, a frozen region in Russia's far east, where he reportedly poured more than $1 billion of his own money into schools, housing, and hospitals. By then, he was already the most famous Russian in Britain, because back in 2003, he had bought Chelsea Football Club for a reported £140 million and turned it into a machine that won roughly 20 major trophies, including 5 Premier League titles and 2 Champions League crowns. Forbes puts his fortune today at around $9.3 billion. And for more than a decade, Eclipse was his calling card, drifting between the Caribbean and the Mediterranean as arguably the most famous private ship on Earth. Then, in February 2022, everything changed in a single week. Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th. Western governments began sanctioning Russian billionaires, and everyone knew Abramovich's name was on the list. But here's the remarkable part. Eclipse had already moved. On February 21st, 3 days before the invasion, she slipped her usual Caribbean anchorage and pointed east, straight across the Atlantic. On March 10th, the United Kingdom sanctioned Abramovich. On March 15th, the European Union followed. From that moment, any port in Britain or the EU could legally freeze the yacht right where she sat. What followed was 2 weeks of the strangest boat race ever run. A 533-foot fugitive threading the Mediterranean, while amateur trackers narrated every mile of her signal online. To reach safety, Eclipse had to skirt the territorial waters of Greek island after Greek island. Every one of them EU territory, every one of them a trap. Tracking data showed her sliding past roads before making the final turn, and on March 22, 2022, she dropped anchor at Marmaris, on the Turkish coast. And Turkey, which never joined the sanctions, became her sanctuary. She wasn't alone. Abramovich's second yacht, Solaris, 458 feet and worth around $600 million, designed by Mark Newson, the same man who designed the Apple Watch, bolted from a Barcelona shipyard on March 8th, mid-refit, and ran for Bodrum. CNBC called it a combined $1 billion of yacht escaping the net. Others weren't so lucky. Alisher Usmanov's Dilbar, the largest yacht in the world by volume, was frozen in Hamburg. Andrei Melnichenko's sailing yacht A was seized in Trieste. And the assets Abramovich couldn't move fast enough were caught. A Gulfstream G650 jet, a 15-bedroom London mansion worth a reported $140 million. And Chelsea itself, sold in May 2022, with the £2.5 billion in proceeds frozen in a bank account, where, astonishingly, they still sit today, 4 years later, while lawyers argue over every penny. And so began the strangest chapter in this ship's life, a victory that looks an awful lot like a prison sentence. For nearly 3 years, Eclipse barely moved from Marmaris. The mooring fees were reported at around $209,000 a year, which honestly is pocket change at this level. The real bill was survival. Reports out of Turkey described the yacht burning around 1 ton of diesel every single day, not to sail anywhere, but simply to run the air conditioning, keeping the salt air and mold from destroying the interiors and the artwork inside. Think about that. A ship built to cross oceans, sitting at anchor, drinking a ton of fuel a day just to stay alive. Then, in August 2025, she finally moved. Not to the Riviera. Not to the Caribbean. She sailed north to a shipyard in the Kocaeli Free Zone near Istanbul. Solaris made the same journey that month, headed for repairs of her own in Izmit Bay, where a single reported fuel stop came to $790,000. And this spring, reports put the price of her ongoing refit at around $100 million. Engines, systems, interiors, everything. $100 million. That's more than Jeff Bezos reportedly paid for Abeona, the entire support yacht I showed you in my Kourou video, spent on repairs for a ship that may never freely sail west again. So let's answer the question we started with. What did Eclipse actually cost? Around $700 million to build. Somewhere past $1 billion at her peak valuation. Tens of millions a year to keep alive. And now a $100 million rebuild. But the real price is written on the map. The most heavily defended private vessel ever launched, engineered against missiles, pirates, and paparazzi, was checkmated by a signature. 4 years on, Eclipse is still magnificent, still afloat, and still effectively confined to one friendly coastline. The fortress held. It's just that the world around it closed. Money can build you a fortress. It can armor the glass, jam the cameras, and hide a submarine in the hull, but it cannot buy back the open sea. So would you trade places? A palace on the sea that you could never fully sail? I'd genuinely love to know, so tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, you know what to do. Subscribe, because next time I'll take you inside another corner of the billionaire atlas that most people never get to see. I'll see you there.